I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses and evidence has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, could you please state your name and capacity in which you appear?
James Shipton. I'm a senior fellow at the School of Government at Melbourne University.
Thank you, Mr. Shipton. Do you have an opening statement?
Yes, I do.
Please.
Mr. Chair, I had the privilege of being ASIC's chair from 2018 to 2021, and I'm very proud of what my colleagues and I were able to achieve. Unfortunately, my last months were tainted by unacceptable conduct from a senior colleague and a billionaire defendant. And I'm here today because the institutional responses to those incidents were fundamentally flawed. Reform is needed to the way these incidents are handled. In particular, WHS guidelines always need to be followed. ASIC's governance structure also needs reform to ensure commissioner accountability and the clarification of leadership responsibilities. I am also here because several statements made to Parliament by ASIC are incorrect. They are damaging and in need of clarification. When I raised these concerns, Treasury informed me that they needed to be put to Parliament. So here I am. I've always been greatly influenced by General David Morrison's words, "The standard you walk past is the standard you accept." They were said in 2013 in response to unacceptable workplace behaviour. Today, I am stopping walking, despite the advice of many who have warned me that I will pay a heavy price. Unfortunately, in both cases of inappropriate conduct, the then government and ASIC did virtually nothing to stop it, nor deter it from happening again. When I asked for protection, it was refused, did not arrive as promised, and when some of it did arrive, it was too late. ASIC and the then government walked past what was happening to me and others. This must never happen again. No one is immune from being a victim of unacceptable workplace behaviour. I was the chair of ASIC, a law enforcement agency. That offered no protection. The system failed me, and I need to prevent it from failing others in the future. And despite what some may say, my appearance is exclusively aimed at preventing history repeating itself and to advocate for reform. From November 2020, I was subjected to 6 months of intimidatory advertising attacking my character, competence, and integrity. This consisted of at least 43 prominent advertisements with eye-catching yellow background in leading newspapers. They were published by a defendant charged with offences instigated by ASIC during my time. The advertisements were soul-destroying for me, my family, and my friends. They were relentless. They cut me to my core. Before I go on, I must say that all those allegations could not be further from the truth. One Sunday morning, after months of relentless advertising, I broke down in front of a newspaper stand as my own face and fanciful words about me stared back from a yellow newspaper page. That was when the advertisements finally became too much. That was when I wanted to end my life. And because I was a serving law enforcement officer, and because I did not want to act in any way to jeopardize the investigation, I looked to ASIC for protection and support that only came half-heartedly months later. I've learned a great deal from this experience. One is that workplace bullying does not have to come from a superior or a peer. It can be perpetrated by an outsider or someone less senior. Moreover, workplace bullying can happen in the print and cyber media where it continues for eternity. Most importantly, I know that workplace bullying very often results in human harm. So what surprised me when the advertisement started was that the then government and ASIC, then led by an acting chair, offered no protection or support, nor did they for the 3 months of relentless advertising that followed. Not one email, not one concerned phone call, no protective measures, nothing. At the time, ASIC and the Treasury made no attempt to be a protective employer, nor did they meet the minimum WHS standards required by law. The only communication I received at the time was from a cabinet minister who called to say not to worry about the advertisements and not to make a fuss. I cannot fathom why that minister could treat the well-being of one of his senior officials, let alone a fellow human being, with such blatant disregard. When I returned to work in early 2021, after 3 months of relentless advertising, I asked ASIC for protection and help. Eventually, after 5 months of abuse, ASIC began looking at the issue. Then after 6 months of the advertising, but only after I'd left ASIC, did ASIC write to the newspapers questioning their publication. Only one large newspaper group ever responded. The other did not even bother to reply. Despite my request that ASIC push for a response, they never did. To this day, I am astounded that ASIC did not press that corporation for a response. This certainly does not reflect a confident and ambitious corporate regulator. I'm still astounded that it took ASIC a total of 6 months to take protective action. And by the time they did, I had already left. Finally, I am astounded at how reputable newspaper groups could stoop to publishing such defamatory advertisements and thus enable the attempted intimidation of a law enforcement officer. Law enforcement officers should not be left unprotected for months and months. This must never happen again. Most importantly, I remain concerned at the precedent the advertising created. Law enforcement officers should not be defamed and intimidated when doing their important work. This could amount to a perversion of justice. It must be deterred. The abusive advertising campaign was not just an attack on an individual, it was an affront to our system of justice. Accordingly, I suggested to ASIC that it was in the public interest for this intimidation to be deterred. When ASIC declined, I explored taking steps to do so personally, but ASIC refused to provide me with the documents necessary to commence an action. ASIC and the then government just walked past, leaving the behaviour undeterred and other law enforcement officers in harm's way. I was also subject to inappropriate behaviour in the workplace from a colleague. In the interest of natural justice, I will not name that person, nor will I comment on specific matters that have been subject of official processes, however faulted those processes may have been. I will only say that the unacceptable behaviour was very serious, did not just impact me, continued for months, was relentless, and took an awful toll. Like the incidents just mentioned, ASIC and the Treasury were slow in their response and only intervened after I had left. I instructed the person in writing to stop their inappropriate behaviour. That person did not. Very early on, I asked Treasury to intervene as the portfolio department. With the advice of both my lawyers and ASIC's lawyers, I wrote to the Treasurer once in an official capacity and the Treasury Secretary on 3 occasions in a personal capacity. I frankly and honestly informed them of the situation and sought their help and intervention. I also spoke with the Treasury Secretary and the Deputy Secretary multiple times. Treasury did not intervene for months, and so the unacceptable behaviour was allowed to continue and the harm compounded. You may wonder why, as ASIC Chair, I could not stop this behaviour. The practical reality is that a CEO can only do something about an employee's behaviour if they have the support of the broader system and is empowered to act. ASIC's deficient governance structures that need reform meant that I did not have the authority over this person. Meanwhile, Treasury failed to intervene. So even though I was nominally superior to the transgressor, the behaviour continued right up to my last days in office. After I left ASIC, there was a confidential investigation. I provided evidence and was interviewed. I was not told of the outcome, despite believing as a person impacted that I should be provided at least some comfort that my testimony served a purpose. I was never assured that measures were put in place so that others would be protected into the future. Unlike other recent precedents, a heavy cloak of confidentiality surrounds this investigation. History shows that fairness does not operate well in the dark. This is especially so when even the processes adopted were kept secret. Sadly, it appears from recent statements to the Senate that ASIC and Treasury did not even apply applicable WHS guidelines. They just walked past this unacceptable behaviour. Since the revelation of how the investigation was handled, I've been troubled about ASIC's disclosures to Parliament. I believe there are several factual errors requiring clarification. ASIC has also failed to properly consult with individuals affected by these statements. I've made submissions to this committee about this and understand they are being considered. Importantly, there have also been statements made to Parliament by the current ASIC chair rationalising the conduct in question as historical, occurring during a period of upheaval at the senior-most level of the organisation, occurring because of the particular circumstances that happened before the current chair's term commenced, that all ended when I left ASIC. ASIC's senior-most level singular not plural, is clearly its chair. Accordingly, these statements unambiguously refer to me. I understand I'm entitled to a right of reply to any adverse comments made to Parliament, and Chair, with your permission, I would like to exercise that right now.
Yes, you can proceed, Mr. Shipton.
Thank you, Chair. Any suggestion that I somehow contributed, provoked, or caused the behaviour in question is factually incorrect and without merit. Instead, I did everything I could to calm the situation, lead ASIC as best I could in trying circumstances, and get Treasury's help that did not come. It is factually wrong and a denial of natural justice to suggest publicly to Parliament that I contributed to the behaviour in question, or that I failed to respond appropriately. These assertions have never been put to me. These statements also suggest that the people, the subject of the conduct, were somehow to blame. The ASIC chair also professed at the same hearing that he did not know much about the investigation's origins, even though it is extremely relevant. As such, he conceded that he would not have known about how I immediately, openly, honestly, and directly informed both ASIC and Treasury officials about my concerns on a continuing basis when trying to resolve the situation. In closing, my attempts to raise these important concerns with ASIC and Treasury were rejected. Instead, Treasury informed me that they have, quote, no obligation to advise ASIC, one of their portfolio agencies, to correct erroneous statements to Parliament. Instead, Treasury just walked past. Again, I'm sure some will criticise me for coming here today, and to those people, I can only remind you of General Morrison's words that followed his important warning. He said it especially applies to those who, by their rank, have a leadership role. If unacceptable behaviour in the workplace can happen to the chair of ASIC and nothing is done, it can happen to anyone. The system needs to change, otherwise history will go on repeating. Meaningful reform is urgently needed. In the meantime, ASIC and Treasury need to stop walking past these behaviours. Thank you.